Hey everyone, and welcome back to today's video. Now, normally on this channel we talk about the future. We talk about predictions and future elections, but today we're going to be taking a look back to the past. Specifically back to November 2024 and the 2024 US presidential election. Now, obviously, President Donald Trump won this election, and as a bit of a reminder, he carried 312 electoral votes, including all 7 swing states. On top of this, he also won the popular vote with 77 million votes, the second highest vote total in U.S. history, only behind Joe Biden's 81 million 5 years ago. Which brings us perfectly to the topic of today's video, which is, could he do it again? If the 2024 presidential election was today, in August 2025, would President Trump be able to win again? And the short answer to this question is yes. I do believe that if the 2024 election was held again today, that President Trump would still win. The question, though, is over the margin and the size. Would he be able to win all 7 swing states again today, as well as the popular vote? We'll need to dive into that. But firstly, let's talk about why I think he would win. And there are 2 reasons. The first reason is because, first, nothing has fundamentally changed since then. To briefly explain this, let's take a look back to the last president, President Joe Biden. Now, the first thing I have to explain is the psychology behind how people vote. People do not vote off of what they see in the media. Voters are not fooled by the tricks and Voters are not fooled by the tricks and twists of a campaign. They vote based off of emotion and vibes, which is dictated by the condition of the country. And this is proved when we look at the last president, Joe Biden. As you can see, at this point in Joe Biden's presidency, around early August 2021, Joe Biden was still approved of. He was at 50.2% approval and only disapproved of by 44%. He was still approved of by 6 points. And that's because nothing major had happened at this point in his presidency. I know it was a while ago, but if you think back 4 years, at this point in August 2021, nothing had fundamentally changed at that point, and that's why he was still approved of. But look at what happens after Afghanistan. The disapprove and approve flip. Biden is now disapproved of in November 2021. And look at where his disapproval rating spikes. It starts to spike in February. There's a huge spike. Let's take a look at where his disapproval rating spikes. There is a spike in the end of February into March of 2022, exactly when the Russian invasion of Ukraine happened, and then spikes to its highest point ever in his presidency in 2022, specifically in July. This was when inflation got really, really bad, when it was at 9-10%. At this point, Biden was disapproved of by almost 20 points nationally. Following this, it gets better and better and better, all the way up to all the way up to October of 2023, when the October 7th attack happens. And then we wait and wait and wait until Biden's debate performance, and guess what spikes? His disapproval rating goes right back up to the 20 points. His disapproval rating goes right back down to the -20 it was all the way back in 2022 during inflation. Now, what do these events all have in common? They're all fundamental changes in the way that the country is being governed and our standing abroad. Not tricks and spins by the media, not what you see on social media, but genuine fundamental changes in the country. And that just has not happened yet with current President Trump. It is only August 2025. He is only about 6-7 months into his term. Nothing really has happened yet. Nothing has fundamentally changed since then. Obviously, the world is in a different place than it was in January of this year. But we have not seen an invasion of another country. We have not seen an historic surge in inflation or unemployment. There has been no recession. And for that reason, I cannot say that enough people have, and for that reason, I cannot credibly say that people seriously regret their decision to vote for President Trump. Simply not enough has happened yet for them to regret that decision. And that's reflected in my second reason, which is that President Trump is still relatively popular. Now, I know that may be crazy to say considering that he is disapproved of by 9 points nationally, which is bad. However, if we take a look back 8 years ago to his first term, at this point in time in August 2017, he was disapproved of by around 18 points. Down 18 points to now being down only 9 points. And don't get me wrong, that's absolutely horrible. That's still bad. But by President Trump standards, that's actually a decent number. And all the way back in early June, he'd actually closed that disapproval gap and was narrowly approved of again, only for a brief amount of time, but he was approved of again after the initial inauguration honeymoon, which never at any point happened during term number 1. And on top of that, let's take a look at the other party, because if Trump were to lose re-election, he would lose to a Democrat. So let's take a look at the current state and how the American people view the Democrat Party. As of right now, the Democrats have a 3-point lead in the generic ballot for 2026, which is good. But take a look back again 8 years ago to 2017. At this point in 2017, it can't quite go as far back, but let's take a look back to this point in 2017. At this point in 2017, the Democrats were ahead 9 points nationally in the generic ballot. They are only ahead 3 points at this point in the generic ballot. They are at half what they were 8 years ago. And that reflects that although there are people who are upset at Trump, although the Democrats have seen some rebound in support, the American people still do not trust them and approve of them enough to put them back into office. And that sums up why I believe President Trump would still win again. But the second part of that question was the margin. As we discussed, in 2024, Trump carried all 7 battleground states: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. But would he win them all again? He won the popular vote, 77 million to 75 million in 2024. But would that happen again? And my answer to that is no. And my reason for that is actually the exact same reason, and the reason for that is actually the exact same, and the reasons for that is actually the exact same reasons as I gave for why he would win again. And that is because we are getting to that September-October period. The first reason I discussed earlier in the video is that people vote off of fundamental changes in the country and our standing abroad. And if you look back at the last president, Biden was not disapproved of until the end of August, September 2021. Generally speaking, in American politics, people don't really pay attention to politics over the summer. They don't really start paying attention again until the fall, till September. And that is when President Biden did fall. And keep in mind, at this point, And keep in mind, after that, he never recovered. There were a series of fundamental changes in the country that the American people disapproved of. The inflation in 2022, the invasion of Ukraine, October 7th, the rise in concerns over his age and mental ability. All of that would have seemed impossible at this point in August 2021. And so as we get to that September expiration date, this is around the time where you start seeing fundamental changes in the country that the American people disagree with. And the second reason I said was how Trump is still relatively popular. But as I said before, he is still disapproved of, and his disapproval rating is growing. He used to be approved of. He was never really disapproved of by any more than 4 or 5 points. He would always be around the 45% mark, and disapprove would get over 50% occasionally. Whereas now, he has pretty much stabilized around being in the low 50s, 51, 52, 53% disapproval, and his approval rating being in the low 40s, 43%, 42%, 44%. That is now stabilizing. He has not recovered. Ever since early June, there has been no major fluctuation in his approval rating. And in terms of the generic ballot, the Republicans were ahead for a while, and there was no clear winner emerging in the generic ballot. It was always relatively close. And although the Democrats are only 3 points ahead, they're still 3 points ahead. They are still leading in the generic ballot by a statistically significant margin. The Republicans are now below 40%. Less than 40% of America wants them to be in power in 2026. And that does show a gradual rebound for the Democrat Party. It is just a matter of time. And this is backed up by the fact that if you look at current polling, there are several polls, but I'll just use one here for the sake of simplicity and time. The Democrats are more motivated to vote in next year's midterms than the Republicans. Now, I know that's talking about midterms, but it does apply broadly. 72% of Democrats or Democratic-aligned registered voters say that they are extremely motivated to vote in the 2026 midterms, 10 points above where they were in 2024. And most importantly, 22. Additionally, if you take a look at U.S. party identification, now Gallup finds that there are more people who align with the Democratic Party than the Republican Party. For the first time since the beginning of 2021, that does represent a change. And not only that, there is a 3-point gap, the biggest gap since the end of 2023, nearly 2 years ago. And this does show that there is some movement, some rebound in support for the Democratic Party. As I previously said, history tells us. And so finally, what would this electoral map look like? And as I already said that I expect Trump would win again, it would be extremely similar to the 2024 map. It's taking me a bit of time to fill this out. And so now I filled out the 2024 map minus the 7 swing states. I expect Kamala Harris to have flipped the states of Wisconsin and Michigan if the election was held again today. But I still expect Trump to hold Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. And my reason for this is the margins in 2024. In 2024, Wisconsin and Michigan were the two closest states. I would expect both to flip back to the Democrats, in this case Kamala Harris, if the election was held today. Although I still would expect Trump to carry the other swing states that had slightly larger margins of victory. And in terms of the popular vote, I do expect that the Democrats, in this case again Kamala Harris, would win the popular vote again, although it would be by less than 0.5%. And if you're a Republican, you do not need to win the popular vote to win the presidency. You just need to not lose it by any more than 3-4 points. And Trump can afford to lose the popular vote by just around 0.5%. So anyways though, thank you all so much for watching this video. Again, this is just my opinion. Feel free to leave your opinions in the comment section down below, and have a great day.